Yeah, so one of the ways, like I told you, misinformation spreads, especially around data, is cherry picking of data. That you pick what is convenient to you in terms of, let's say, you advocate a position, and you'll obviously cherry pick data that strengthens your position. Whereas somebody might pick some other data and tell the exact opposite of what you're saying. So cherry picking is a very, very common form. My suggestion would be, if you believe that somebody has not done a good job of actually representing the data as is giving sources and making them understand that, okay, what somebody has shared is not the full information. So if you're a private business trying to get into, let's say, EVs or some dealership, you can easily understand at which locality, which part of the country, what vehicle is doing well. This is a very important things to make your decisions. For example, a lot of private businesses, especially startups, in their pitch decks, they have to write something as total addressable market. Now, a lot of this TAM comes from baseline population data. So how many, for example, if your service is about older people, so you need to understand how many older people are there in the first place, right? So a lot of this data can be used for TAM, can be used for where and what, that kind of intelligence. This could be very, very useful.
Start off with the first question from Monisha. Hi sir, thanks for the presentation. I appreciate the sources provided. Can you suggest practical measures on preventing spreading misinformation among these datasets? Are there in any data governance authorities by the government to prevent this?
Yeah, so one of the ways, like I told you, misinformation spreads, especially around data, is cherry picking of data. That you pick what is convenient to you in terms of, let's say, you advocate a position, and you'll obviously cherry pick data that strengthens your position. Whereas somebody might pick some other data and tell the exact opposite of what you're saying. So cherry picking is a very, very common form. My suggestion would be, if you believe that somebody has not done a good job of actually representing the data as is giving sources and making them understand that, okay, what somebody has shared is not the full information. So for instance, one common form is, so if you're comparing, let's say, two different entities, you pick and choose years that are comfortable for you. Let's say, you pick up only 2 years, 3 years, saying in this year, this was X is better than Y. But there could be a lot of other years where Y could be better than X. So in that cases, I think giving the entire data would be useful. Authorities, there are no specific authorities in government to prevent this, but the Press Information Bureau, which is the public relations arm of the government of India, whenever they see that data is being misrepresented, they do put out tweets and they have a fact check wing, but there is no specific authority as such. So it is the individual ministry or the individual government, either at the state or central level, it is up to them to tell their side of the...
How education system can support in understanding government data?
Okay. Yeah, thank you for the question. What I believe is these, unfortunately, what happens is these are all, in so to speak, practical life skills, and they don't usually form part of the curriculum, except for a few very specialized courses. Let's say if you're doing data analytics or journalism, you get to understand, but most of them are not, taught at the either school or college level. So my practical suggestion could be, now that we're talking, about the national new education policy and that freedom to pursue what people can. I think there has to be some form of customization, both at the school and the college levels, to introduce, may not be for marks alone, but these are important life skills, all said and done. So like digital skills are important life skills. I think understanding data is an important life skill, irrespective of what you wish to use it for in the future. So we could start with very simple things. For example, there is a government school in a village. So I would start by saying, let us all collect data about our village. So what is the population of our village? Who stays in our village? What are the facilities that are available in our village? How many are literate? How many get schemes? These are all very, very relevant to that village. So I think I would start there. So if there is a school in a village or in a ward in an urban, so these are very practical ways of doing. We cannot wait for everything to become, formally part of the system, because that will take ages. And, these are things that are best led by institutions that can take this forward.
And I have another question. I want to ask you how, according to your opinion, AI technologies, generative AI technologies of ChatGPT, Gemini, and another technologies can support in understanding government and public data.
Yeah, you're very right. Technology is definitely going to help a great deal in democratization, while it has its own ills. So especially with AI, what we are seeing is so in the first wave of, if you see the first wave of internet penetration, we saw these walls about information access being broken. That now nobody is gatekeeping our information, but I can access what I want to. Now with AI, what will happen is a lot of higher order skills which were only accessible to few people who are professionally trained, like analysis, like technology skills. AI will make it very, very easy. So for example, it is already there, but maybe in the next 6 months to a year, we'll have if you have a small data set or data, you upload it onto any of these AI engines and ask questions over it in your natural language. It need not be English also. You could ask in the language of your mother tongue. It will start giving you answers if the data is good enough, clean, standardized. So we will definitely see these lines getting, in fact, not just blurred, but going away, where you will need very higher order skills to make use of this data. So in that sense, AI, ChatGPT, or whichever models and products these are going to help a great deal.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next question is from KR. Can you suggest some data sources related to disaster and climate change?
Yeah, Akash. So as far as disaster is concerned, you may find a lot of data on the National Disaster Management Agency, the NDMA, and the respective state disaster management agencies called the SDMAs. So you'll find reports and you'll find some important data. Also at the Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha about various natural disasters, what was the loss, etc. With respect to climate change, you will find a lot of data in the Ministry of Environment, MOEFF. So in fact, in partnership with the Ministry of Statistics, they release an annual report called the ENVIStats, ENVISTASTS. You can Google it, you'll find it. So ENVIStats is nothing like environmental statistics. So you'll find a lot of good data there. There is also a annual forest survey that happens, not annual, but every 2 years. It is released by the Ministry of Environment, Forest Survey of India. You'll find a lot of data about forests and trees there. You can also look at IMD, the Indian Meteorological Department. They release data on rainfall and other weather-related events. So these are 4 or 5 sources that can give you good data on environment, disaster, and climate change.
Moving on to the next question from Zahid. The presentation was insightful. Had a question on how many times the protocols to collect the government data, especially the sensitive subjects like health and hospitals, are revised. We at times encounter that the protocol or SOPs are still age-old while the dissemination of the collected data is getting advanced. Don't you think the difference of this advancement is creating possible discrepancies?
Yeah, Zahir, you're absolutely right. That what happens in the government is the changes don't happen at the pace that the society is changing, especially with the governments. So, we see, for instance, in the last at least 12 months, we have seen so much change in public life through AI. But the government is still grappling to understand how we can regulate or have some guidelines around AI. So governments are usually, because of the size and because of the nature of the bureaucracy, they are very slow to make these changes, while society moves a lot faster, not just with India, but with any other nation. So they do create discrepancies. I am not denying. In fact, some of the examples that I showed you was also to highlight such discrepancies. So the only solution to that is, I'm a strong advocate of, I think, not confrontation, but engagement. So what I mean by that is there are entities within the government. We can have all kinds of people and all that. I think there are people open to reason. So if you are able to highlight these discrepancies, if you are able to take this up with the right channels, I think there are people willing to change, because these are issues that concern them as well. So for example, in our work, we deal with data almost on a daily basis. We found certain discrepancies in the GST data, for instance, or the data on the RBI website. We promptly compiled everything, sent it to relevant authorities. Some authorities chose to respond, they corrected it, they thanked us saying, thank you for highlighting. Some other authorities did not respond. Now that does not mean 100% of the government is like that. So I think the effort has to be to keep highlighting these, give suggestions. So I'm not saying all of them, but at least some of them will be taken up, and it will be for the common good of all of us.
I hope that answers your question, Zaid. Thank you so much for the answer, sir. The next question is from Ezil. Hi, sir. This is such a valuable informative session. As you've said, data released by various organizations are not the exact reflection. Then how we can use it for our purposes as the base source?
Yeah, you have asked a very important question, Izil. You're right when you said if it's not a reflection, how are we even going to use as a base source? So there is a critical difference between government data and data released by private agencies. The critical difference being, a lot of people might disagree on private data because there is no sense of accountability, so to speak, there. With government data, there is always, something of an attached accountability and responsibility because it is being done with public money. So though government data might have discrepancies, errors, I think as baseline, since most of us agree on that data, we can start using it as a base source, but with the right caveats. So if you are using crime data from the NCRB, while we can all agree that it may not reflect the actual status of crime on the ground, but that's a good starting point. Now the starting point could also be used to highlight, for example, why we think the reporting in certain places may not be as good as the reporting in certain other places, and what can be done about this. So I think, we cannot get caught up in, I'm not trying to advocate that the data is all accurate. It's not. I can openly say that. I can show you so many discrepancies. We do it on a daily basis. But getting stuck at the discrepancies and not using it is a much larger disservice to the entire ecosystem, because that will never change if you don't engage. So the more you engage with that data and start highlighting these, writing to, things will change. And over time, the understanding is that over time, these discrepancies reduce so that all of us can benefit from it.
The next question is from Prasanna. Could you please tell us the best techniques to clean the data sets to make it usable?
I wouldn't say there is one standard method to clean data sets. I think it depends on the kind of data set that you're dealing with. But some of the things that I can tell you is, so whenever you're dealing with, let's say, data sets that talk about geographies, states, districts. So I think one thing that you could take care of is standardizing the names of these places, because analysis often goes wrong when you don't standardize. If, let's say, writing Pradesh, somebody writes MP, somebody writes Madhya Pradesh, somebody writes UP, AP, etc. So there is a great chance that you miss in the analysis. So while it's a question of what is the data set that you're dealing with, some standard techniques could be to standardize certain things, especially geographies, entities, and also one other common thing that we see is with units. So most government sources, some of them say this is in thousands, this is in crores, this is in lakhs. So if you miss that unit, there is also a chance that your ultimate conclusion or analysis might go wrong.
So the next question is from Himandra. How the government data can be helpful for corporate and private businesses?
In fact, a lot of government data is very, very useful to private businesses, corporate, startups. So for instance, if you look at, I'll give you a couple of examples. If you look at the Vahan dashboard. So Vahan dashboard is managed by the Ministry of Road Transport. So they give details of vehicles registered in the country, which means which vehicles are being brought. So if you look at that data on a monthly basis, they give up to the most granular level. So at a RTO level, under which brand, how many vehicles were registered. So if you're a private business trying to get into, let's say, EVs or some dealership, you can easily understand at which locality, which part of the country, what vehicle is doing well. This is a very important things to make your decisions. For example, a lot of private businesses, especially startups, in their pitch decks, they have to write something as total addressable market. Now, a lot of this TAM comes from baseline population data. So how many, for example, if your service is about older people, so you need to understand how many older people are there in the first place, right? So a lot of this data can be used for TAM, can be used for where and what, that kind of intelligence. This could be very, very useful.
So I'd like to ask a question which is sort of personal, but I live in Gujarat, and you shared a slideshow earlier which projected the liquor consumption in Gujarat, and it seemed like it's far behind in terms of the government data.
Yeah.
But the actual picture is quite different here is what we noticed. And how do we sort of get, if it's possible, an actual data, because most of it feeds oligarchs feeds politicians, the police bodies, and everybody basically makes money out of liquor consumption being illegal here. So
Yeah.
the data itself is very falsified. Maybe even the survey, when you go to the survey, if it would be a taboo to consume liquor here, so if you go and ask people home to home whether they consume
They would
liquor,
not.
they would
They would
not
not.
reveal the
Exactly.
true data.
Exactly.
So how can a larger body, say the central body, central government body, maybe figure out how much liquor is being consumed or how much of it is in the black market or anything like that?
Unfortunately, I may not have a perfect answer for you, but there are three things, three possibilities. One may not be in this specific case, but quite often what happens is we do not have the exact kind of data. We may not always have, let's say, the exact data that we are looking for. So quite often what we always tell people when they ask is look for proxy data. So when I say proxy, for instance, if you're talking about how do I divide a city into neighborhoods in terms of their wealth, let's say a lot of private businesses want to do this because they want to focus. Now, there is no data on pin code wise who is living where, or even income tax returns, hardly 5% people file in this country. We know that. So it is not an accurate reflection. So one of the things people do as a proxy is look at the municipal circle rates, registrations. So in a particular area, if, let's say wealthy people live or there is demand for certain things, suddenly the land rate or tax rates go up. That is reflected in government records. So that can be taken as a proxy. In the case that you suggested, I think the only way to do it is some important body taking up a survey on their own and charting out the extent of this problem and highlighting it. Only then this will change, because the scale of that problem, both illegal, because there are a lot of illegalities, like you said, it is officially banned, but there is a parallel business that runs, and people, it's a taboo. You obviously can't go and agree that you are consuming when it is banned. So I think part of the solution could be some big agency which is advocating for this issue, coming up with their own survey and saying, this is a huge problem. What your data says is very less, and this is how we can address. Or sometimes it could be, I know it's ironic, but problems get highlighted when there is a tragedy. So in many cases, in some states where people consume adulterated liquor and fall sick and die, that's when suddenly states take concern saying, oh, there is such a huge problem of adulterated liquor. Now, not that the problem only arose then. It's a tragedy, it's ironic, but that's how governments wake up. So I think these are multiple methods that could be used, though it's not a very perfect answer.
Thank you so much for the reply, sir. I completely agree. There was an instance a few years back where some bootleggers or who were selling Indian country liquor or desi hooch basically mixed methanol instead of ethanol in the primary content, and about 80-90 people started suffering a lot. A lot of them died, a lot of them lost their eyesight, and post that the regulations were stricter for quite some time, even for people who are importing legally, who sell via permits. It got difficult for them to get the paperwork done and everything. And hospitality business suffers a lot due to businesses because of this. The next question is from Desh. If we have data compiled from personal interactions with stakeholders, but it is not available in published form anywhere, then how do we cite that data in a research article?
Yeah, Abdesh, there is no standard answer to this question. It depends on the research methodology that you're following. Personal data that you collect personally through interactions with stakeholders is an accepted form of research, but it depends on, so if you're one publisher, sometimes publishers don't accept certain kinds of data. So it depends on that one. And secondly, what kind of research methodology would you want to follow? Because a lot of research could only be because, let's say I am researching on a issue where no data is available. Now, does not mean I can't do research, right? So it has to be some form of survey that you do, right? Survey is an accepted form. You can publish the survey, but you will have to conform to the standards of those surveys. So when I say standards, the random sampling, whichever method you wish to follow. So if you take an official course on research methodology and statistics, they will teach you the various methods of research, what kind of sampling is to be done so that it is scientifically well and truly represents the larger ecosystem. So if you follow that can be cited in a research article. It depends on what kind of research and what kind of methodology you're following, and you can do accordingly.